Prem, we're live!
What? You're on now?
Yes, that's why the light in front of you is on.
Welcome back to State Sports News. We've got some breaking news right now for you. Hang on, they've actually agreed to do this? Really?
Yes, just say what's written in front of you.
Okay, so a new announcement has been made jointly by the FA, Premier League, EFL, Vanarama Leagues and the major sports broadcasters across the globe. From the 2019-2020 season onwards, the top 6 tiers of English football will have a far more even share of the TV money normally given to the Premier League clubs, and that also includes a solidarity and parachute payments. Supposedly, those in charge have decided to actually listen to fans for once and to help the little guy. Amazing. We here at State Sports News cannot believe it, but they are going to be providing these extra funds. Currently, Premier League sides will receive a minimum of a whopping £80 million guaranteed per season per club, and that can rise even higher. However, that will be over halved for next season. Hang on. Some more breaking news? Apparently, Bury FC, the football side very closely linked to liquidation in League One, has now been saved following on from this new announcement and the new influx of TV money. Already, within minutes of this deal announced, some positive results have come from this new amount of money in the lower leagues. Just fantastic. We understand, however, that details of these planned changes by the FA and the various other organisations will be handled by the new up-and-coming YouTube channel LS Plays FM. We here at State Sports News haven't really heard of this channel. Is he any good?
Yeah, he actually does make great content.
Okay, well, there you go. Apparently the FA's new spokesperson, LS Plays FM, will handle all of the details. Well, fair enough then. This covers that announcement. Thanks very much for tuning in to State Sports News. See you again soon. So guys, welcome to what is my first experiment here on my channel LS Plays FM. So essentially, normally with LS Plays FM, we generally speak and play kind of let's play playthroughs of Football Manager, with my main save at the moment being my Stones Rolling On Up series on the channel with Maidstone United, where I'm trying to take them from tier 6 to the top. But I've always enjoyed doing experiments kind of personally, and I've always enjoyed watching them as well. So I thought, why not do one I've been wanting to do for a while and actually put it onto the channel. So I've decided to do an experiment where we're going to be looking at the TV deal within English football. As being a supporter of a lower league team, I've often seen the question asked, and I understand the reasons for and against it. But the question that I'm kind of referring to is the idea of why does more money not trickle down from the Premier League into lower league football? And it's a valid question, and so I've decided to put that question to the test in Football Manager, and I've decided to do that via the TV deal. So essentially we've done it along the lines of, what if the Premier League TV deal was split more fairly across English football? So it's basically that each league will get a more fair percentage, I guess, of the money that gets spread across English football. And essentially the point will be to see whether or not doing that affects English football in any major way or not. So we're going to look at things such as wages, such as transfer spends, foreign imports in terms of how many foreign players are brought in, and also looking at facilities and basically seeing if these changes will have a dramatic increase on these factors within Football Manager and within English football as a whole. It'll also be interesting to see whether or not the gap in terms of competitiveness between the Premier League and the lower leagues kind of closes or not, or if the Premier League kind of maintains its tight grip on English football, and if they can keep competing at, say, the European front and so on. One of the other things that's worth noting with this experiment here is that rather than just doing one database and going forward 20 years, which is what we've done, we've gone forward 20 years for this save, I've decided to do it across 5 different databases. I feel just having one doesn't really give a proper representation of the figures. It's just that could be a run-off essentially. So I decided to do it 5 times and get essentially an average over those 5 databases that we can then use. Also, just so you are aware, guys, I only split the experiment into 2 parts. This will have to be part 1, and then we'll have part 2 in a couple of days. Just because overall, with everything that's going with all the finances and everything that we want to look at, it's going to take a little bit of time. So I thought it made more sense to split into 2 parts rather than just have one massively long episode. What I'll do is I'll get into the actual changes that we've made with the figures right now, and then we'll get into season 1 very shortly. So I'll just quickly run through with you the kind of the main bulk of the changes that we've done for the finances with this save, just so you know obviously what we've actually changed. So I won't go through in huge amounts of detail of it because I want to get into the actual experiment here, of course. But essentially, the Premier League initially got given this big deal of about £1.7 billion in TV money, and then basically extra payments, including things like parachute payments and kind of extra figures per match. If a game gets shown like Super Sunday or something, the team will get a bit of extra money for that as well. Essentially, we have over halved what the Premier League is going to be receiving. They're going to, instead of receiving essentially 80 million per club per season, it's going to drop to about 38 million, and then the rest of that money will kind of get evenly distributed between the leagues below. So essentially that extra 42 mil that would normally go to each extra club is now going to go across the other leagues. So roughly about 750 £800 million is going to get split across the leagues. So it's quite a dramatic amount of money that they're going to get given. Of course, the Championship being the higher tier is going to get a bigger majority, and then it's going to trickle down essentially to the leagues below. But basically, teams in the Vanarama National League, National North-South, were initially not getting anything for TV money. So essentially, they're going to be getting about £1 million, 2-3 mil each for being just in their league, and then extra payments such as solidarity payments and possibly parachute payments if they get relegated have all been drastically increased as well. So those teams in and around those leagues are going to start earning a lot more money. And especially teams in League 2 and League 1 as well, which don't get much money either, are going to see a big upturn in their fortunes essentially. So we should see some interesting things happen in this save. As I say, something which it may well happen in real life in terms of actually making more money available to those lower leagues. I doubt it'd be quite to the extent that I've gone to in this database. I'll include in the description actual link to kind of the actual figures if you're interested in exactly the figures that got changed, if you want to have a proper look at it. But if they ever did in real life, it probably wouldn't be quite this dramatic. But even so, I wanted to go to this level to kind of see what could happen. But let's get into Season 1, and then we'll run through some of the actual kind of transfers and so on that get done in Season 1, and then we can go on from there. So here we are in one of our 5 databases that I mentioned. Essentially, I've got the plan to go between years 1, 5, 10, 15 and 20 in the database, essentially. So we're here in September 2019. The reason why it's September rather than June or July is that you can't get the actual wage figures and transfer figures from the teams quite so accurately until you get after the transfer window closes, because then it gives you the statistic for things like the wages and so on. So that's why we're here in September, and that'll be a constant theme throughout. But what we'll do is I'll run through with you essentially how the leagues are looking at the beginning, so in this season here, and then we'll go on to the further seasons on from here. Obviously at the moment there's not been anything that interesting happen because there's not been any time to do so. I did have the transfer window enabled, so a couple of teams have made some slight transfers and nothing major has happened. One of the big ones is the fact that Bury, who obviously got saved thanks to the TV money in this experiment here, have basically bought a whole new squad. I did enable them to have fake players put into their squad to give them some players, but they've gone out and bought about 11 players to try and actually help them in their team. The likelihood is they probably won't do particularly well because most of those players are quite poor and probably not up to League 1 standards. So we may see Bury unfortunately drop down the leagues, but it's better than being extinct, I suppose. But let's have a quick look over some of these figures then. So here we are, and we're going to focus firstly on the Prem and then kind of make our way down. Some of the things we're going to be looking at are going to be things such as the kind of overall average wage across the league and over the course of the year, going to be the kind of the highest transfers spent in the leagues, the overall amount of money spent in the leagues, the number of foreign players they bring in, and then the level of the facilities that clubs have. So with Season 1 then, with the Premier League, the overall wages that got spent across all the clubs and across all 5 databases was about £83 million per club per year. The highest transfer that was made by a club was £80 million, which was Manchester United with Harry Maguire. I still can't believe they paid that much for him. And then the overall spend on average between all those databases was almost 1.6 billion in terms of spending money on players. They brought in roughly about 8.6% foreign players on average, and then the facilities for the Premier League were excellent for training and then excellent for youth. Essentially, the facilities all get given a rating between poor in-game to state-of-the-art, and because there's 10 different levels, I've given them all a number between 1 and 10, essentially, and then that's how I worked it out. So excellent was basically level 8, and that's essentially what the Premier League came out with. The Championship, on the other hand, was spending roughly about £15.8 million a year on their wages per club. So obviously in comparison to Premier League, that's a big drop. But then it comes to the transfers. The highest spent on a player was only £12.5 million, and overall they only spent £173 million on average. So it's almost only 10% of what the Prem was spending. So it'll be interesting to see if that gap narrows as we go on. Foreign imports actually was roughly the same. It was at 8% for the Championship, so that's pretty similar. But then the facilities, it does drop off slightly, with the training for the Championship being at great and then the youth being at good. So again, it'll be interesting if that gap does close as we go through. League One, however, there is a big difference between the top two and then League One and then League Two. League One was only spending £2.87 million a year on wages per club, and then their highest spend was only 1.8 million, with the average overall spend across the leagues only being 6.35 million. So absolutely tiny in comparison. Their foreign import was at 2.4%, and then their facilities for training and youth is good and then average for the youth. So again, it really does drop off. League Two, however, is a different story. They are only spending 1.84 million on wages, and their highest transfer spend was only 350 grand, and the overall spend in the league was only 850,000 on average, which is tiny. It's absolutely minuscule. And plus, essentially, the foreign import only came out at 0%. The way the game works at foreign import is it gives you essentially a figure between 0 and 100%, and there's no decimals. So essentially, every time I looked at League Two, it was always at 0. So it's probably actually roughly about 0.2, but it came out at 0, so that's what I've gone with. The facilities for League Two, though, came out adequate for training and then below average for youth, so not great there. The Vanarama National is when it begins to really drop off. The average amount of wages was under $1 million. It was 939,000 per club per year, and then the highest transfer in the league was only 25 grand, and the overall kind of average spend in total was only £26,500, and then they kind of had an average of foreign imports at 0.2%. The actual level of the training youth, though, wasn't actually as bad. It was actually the same as League Two. It was adequate for training and then below average for their youth facilities. But then we get into the Vanarama North and South, and this is where things really do drop. The Vanarama North was slightly better than the Vanarama South, with an average wages per annum of £380,000 per year. But then the overall highest spend in the league was nothing. The total spend was nothing. The foreign import was at 0.6%, but then the facilities for training were below average, and then their youth were basic, and the Vanarama South is horrendous, with their average wages only being 290 grand a year. Again, the transfer spend was 0 across the board, and then their facilities came at a basic for training and poor for youth. So very, very poor for the Vanarama North South. It'll be interesting to see within the first 5 years if that changes dramatically or not. But that covers the first year of the game. As I say, there's not been anything really that major that's changed because we've only been going for a month or so. But let's get into Season 5, and we should hopefully start to see some interesting things taking place. So guys, now we're here on Season 5, and I can tell you now there's quite a few interesting things that have already begun to take place. Before I get going, now you might notice a slight little change around here. I've had to move my desktop and my screens and everything, so we're in a different room at the moment. So hopefully it's not too noticeable for you. But we'll get straight into the actual figures here. So with the Premier League, there has been quite a dramatic increase, despite the fact that they've actually had money obviously taken away from them, in the sense that they're now being paid less in terms of TV money. Their actual average wages have gone up considerably to now 96.5 mil. Additionally, the highest transfer fee that's actually been spent across the league has gone up hugely as well, because of course Season 1 was Harry Maguire at 80 mil, and it's now gone up to 130 million, was the highest spend by any Premier League club. You then have the average amount of transfer spend done by all the clubs has actually dropped though. It's dropped to £1.21 billion. But then the foreign import percentage has gone up enormously from the 8.6% on average as it was in Season 1 to now 51.2 in Season 5. So it's a huge increase. For the facilities though, they've stayed exactly the same for the Premier League. They're both now on excellent. The Championship, however, has begun to see some dramatic effects take place already. But the average wages have got up by over 25% now. Initially, they were spending roughly £16 million per year on wages. That's now risen to 22.5 million. Additionally, the highest transfer fee a Championship club spent was £38.5 million on one player, which is ridiculous to even think of a Championship team spending that type of money. It wasn't that long ago that would be unheard of for Premier League teams, yet alone Championship sides. The overall spend by the Championship clubs was almost 300 million across all the databases, and their foreign imports went up dramatically as well to 30.8%, which would suggest that this new money floating about the league is kind of attracting more foreign players, which is quite interesting to see. Additionally, the facilities in the Championship also did go up slightly. The training stayed the same at great, but their youth went up to great as well. So overall, that is an increase on the youth facilities for the Championship teams. For the League One side, again, a similar kind of pattern has happened, but on a much bigger scale. The average wages went up by almost 200% for League One teams to now almost 8 million at £7.6 million. The highest transfer fee paid by a League One team is now 13.75 million, which is crazy to even think that it is possible. And the average kind of total spend for the clubs is £67.8 million. Additionally, the League One teams are importing roughly around 15% foreign players. The League One facilities as well have had a big bump as well. Initially, they were originally good and average for training and then youth. They've now gone up to great and good. So you can see there that League One is kind of having a big boost from this TV deal taking place. League Two is very similar to League One, not quite as dramatic, but still very kind of large increases. The average wages have now gone up to 4.5 million per club, and the highest fee spent by a League Two team was £2.6 million. So quite a big drop off from League One, but it's still a lot more than what it previously was at only £850,000. The total transfer spend on average was at a massive almost £19 million, which is ridiculous, as originally it was £850,000 on average in Season 1. So that's gone up just a small amount there. Additionally, the foreign import has now gone up to 10.2%, and the League Two facilities have gone up to a good in training and average with youth. The Vanarama National has had a big boost too. Its average wages have gone up to 3.38 million per club. Their highest transfer fee was actually surprisingly more than what League Two spent. A team in the Vanarama National spent £3 million on one player. And their overall transfer spend as well went up quite dramatically to 10.9. So the gap between the Vanarama National and League Two is quite similar now. The foreign import has gone up to 2.8%. And then the levels of the Vanarama National facilities have gone up by 1 as well, because they're now both sitting at average. So the Vanarama North, however, has had kind of not as big of a bump, the same as the Vanarama South. The Vanarama North has now got up to £1.75 million per year in terms of their annual wages. The highest transfer fee that was paid for one player was £775,000, and then the average kind of spend for transfers overall was almost 2.5 million. They additionally imported 0.8% foreign players, which, considered it was previously at 0, is quite a good increase for them. Plus, the Vanarama North facilities, though, they didn't actually change. They both stayed at below average and then basic, which is what it was previously at. Vanarama South, however, did see a small increase. Their average wages went up to 1.72 million, and the highest transfer fee that was paid was £475,000. So not quite as high as the Vanarama North, but their average kind of total transfer spend was higher at 2.78 million. The foreign import was slightly lower at 0.6%. And then the facilities came out as the same as the Vanarama North at below average and basic. But the Vanarama South, however, that is an increase on what they previously were at when it was basic and poor. So overall, you can see that the figures, although we're only 5 years in, are beginning to dramatically change. And as a result of that, there's been some rather interesting things happening within the game itself. I'll just go through and show you a couple of kind of the strangest things that I've found so far. So for me, one of the big things that I've found is there's been some rather strange kind of changes with managers in the game. So one of the first things I found ridiculous, to be honest, and I say this is across multiple databases, so I will flag up on screen which database we're looking at certain points. But in this one here, Liverpool have got, as you can see, Pep Guardiola as manager. And it's worth noting that obviously Klopp was there previously, but if you look who was there before Guardiola currently, it was Vincent Kompany. So in this kind of save world, essentially, Liverpool is a bit weird. And not only is Liverpool a bit weird, but Man City is a bit weird. I'll come to Man City in a second. But first of all, Jurgen Klopp has had probably what I think is one of the harshest sackings I've ever seen in the game, as he won the Champions League with Liverpool, again, mind noting. I think it's his second or third one he's won in this save with them. He's had a Premier League win, he's had an FA Cup, he's had Carabao Cup as well in there, and he's just won the Champions League with them in 2022, and in the Liverpool owners decided to sack him and replace him with Vincent Kompany, former Man City legend, captain, and much more. As a manager, not really much there. In this save, he'd been Anderlecht player manager, player assistant manager, etc. He'd been Derby manager, and then Wolfsburg hadn't actually won anything. And Liverpool went, oh yeah, we'll bring in Vincent Kompany. And you'll notice now on his profile, though, he's at Man City. So Man City decided to sack Pep Guardiola and then bring in current Liverpool boss Vincent Kompany, who still in his career hasn't won anything, I don't believe. Let's have a quick look at him. I don't think he won anything while at Liverpool. Let's have a quick look. Oh, no, I take that back. He actually won the Champions League with them, so no, ignore me. He won 2 Super Cups in the Champions League, so that's possibly why they brought him in. But yeah, Man City decided to get rid of Pep, despite the fact, obviously, he's Pep Guardiola. And Liverpool hired him, so always good. Nice little managerial merry-go-round there, and it's completely and utterly bizarre, and I don't understand it. Another really weird thing as well that I found with this same database is that obviously transfers in the game are always interesting, to be honest, but there was a really weird one in this one. If I look at the current transfer window and look at the highest spending for this season, this isn't the highest overall for season 5 for the Prem, but it's one of the highest, and it's Manchester United signing Alex Iwobi. And don't get me wrong, Alex Iwobi's not a bad player. I mean, he's a decent Prem player, but the idea of someone paying £88 million for him is completely beyond me, especially when they paid it only a season after Lyon paid 40 million basically, and he had one good year in Ligue 1. And man, you go, yeah, I tell you what, we'll triple that almost and give you £88 million. It's ridiculous, and I can't understand it. Yeah, he's done all right. He's got 2 in 3, but it's Alex Iwobi. He's not that good, and it's not like he's young Alex Iwobi either. He's 28. You're not going to have him for that many years until his physical starts to drop off and so on. Just very, very strange. One of the final things I'll just show you is there's 2 rather interesting managerial appointments in this database here inside the Prem. Essentially, if we go to Leicester first of all, you'll see Leicester manager Zinedine Zidane. That's correct, former Real Madrid boss, multiple Champions League winner. Zinedine Zidane is now at former Premier League winners once upon a time in Leicester City. In this save as well, he's been at Milan. He's not done very well, to be honest. But the most interesting thing I found is not actually the fact he's at Leicester. It's part of his backroom staff. Because if we look at his staff on here, of course you see Zinedine Zidane at the top there. And if we scroll down, you'll see his under-23s manager, Cristiano Ronaldo. So he started to follow his former manager in Zidane to Leicester. I just find that fascinating. I really like the way the foot manager does some of those kind of things with how player relationships and staff relationships affect kind of where they move to. And this is a prime example. The idea of Ronaldo being an under-23s manager at Leicester is just quite funny, to be totally honest, because I don't think he'd ever would. I think he may be a manager one day, but I don't think he'll go to Leicester and be an under-23s boss. The other managerial appointment I'll show you as well is with Arsenal. And they've brought back Thierry Henry. In this, he's actually done quite well. He obviously starts at Montreal in real life, and then he went to Marseille. I don't know if he won anything at Marseille. He won the Europa Conference League, that weird tournament that we'll be seeing sooner rather than later. And then, yeah, Arsenal have just hired him, so it's going to be quite interesting quite what he does in this database. But other than that, that wraps up kind of the strange things that have gone on so far in Season 5. Let's get on to Season 10, have a look at the figures, and again, some interesting developments that have begun to take place. So with Season 10, so of course Season 5 we saw some big development and big changes going on across all of the divisions. Season 10, however, the changes aren't quite so dramatic, and in some cases there's actually been some small decreases overall. With the finances, the Premier League increased the kind of their spending ever so slightly. They went up to £102.7 million per year in terms of their average annual spend on wages. Their highest transfer fee was quite dramatically higher at £178 million, but the overall transfer spend on average was roughly the same at £1.27 billion. The average amount of foreign players imported rose slightly as well to 55%, and then the training and youth stayed the same at excellent. The Championship again had a slight increase. They went up to £24.5 million per annum for their wages. They also saw a quite large decrease in terms of the highest transfer fee spent for one club at only £19.5 million. So it's basically halved what they spent in Season 5. The average spend across the leagues though was roughly the same, this time at £257 million. But then the average amount of foreign players imported did drop slightly to only 25%. The facilities for the Championship clubs stayed the same, excellent and great, so no change there either. With League 1 clubs, however, there was a slight increase once again. Their annual wages went up to £8.8 million. The highest transfer fee spent by one club was roughly the same at almost £12 million. And then the total transfer spend on average did increase, this time to £86.5 million. The importing of foreign players stayed roughly the same at around 12%. And then the facilities, though, for League 1 clubs did increase slightly. They went from great and good for training and youth up to great for both. League 2 clubs did see an increase as well. They went up to £5.29 million for their average wages. The highest fee paid for one player did increase dramatically, though, to £4.9 million. And the total transfers on average increased as well up to £31.3 million. So overall an increase there for the League 2 clubs. The amount of foreign players imported on average was at 8.2%, which does decrease slightly based on Season 5, but not hugely. But then, rather importantly, the facilities increased dramatically from good and average originally to great and good for the training and then the youth. For the Valorama National, there was an increase in terms of money being spent, with the wages going up to 4.475 million per annum, and the highest transfer fee spent was roughly the same at 2.8 million. The total transfer spend on average did decrease quite significantly though, from just over 10 million to 7 million pounds. And their foreign import did drop slightly as well to 2%. The facilities, however, did stay exactly the same, both on average. For the Valorama North and South, there was a bit of kind of chopping and changing with them. The Valorama North did see some increases. Their wages stayed roughly the same at £1.75 million per year. The highest transfer fee spent was roughly the same again at £825,000. But the total transfer spend did drop to just below £2 million. But the number of foreign players imported did increase slightly, this time to 1.2%. Their facilities, however, is where the big increase came from. Beforehand, they were at below average and basic for the training and youth. This increased, though, to adequate and below average, so increase on 1 for both. The Valorama South, however, didn't have quite so much luck. Their average wages being spent dropped to 1.35 million, and the highest transfer fee spent did increase ever so slightly to 575,000. But the total transfer spend on average dropped massively to only £930,000. Plus the foreign import of players did drop slightly as well, this time to 0.4%. Facilities all stayed the same, but it's quite interesting to see that in some cases some of the leagues are still improving quite dramatically, and some of the others are either levelling out or dropping off. But I'm unsure as to why that is. It may just be a case that kind of some smaller teams have got into the leagues and so on, and it's kind of dragged the overall average down. Maybe that might be why. But anyway, guys, let's get into some of the strange goings on in this Season 10, shall we? I can tell you right now, there's some very weird things that have happened. So here we are looking at what is Database 4 for Season 10, and I'll begin here just to go through some of the strange things going on in the Premier League, because this is one of the weirdest things I've seen in terms of people who are managing teams. You can see on the right side that Man City have been dominating the Prem in this one. They are still being managed by Pep, and he's having a much better time than some of the other databases. But if we have a quick flick through some of the managers in this league, we can kind of have a quick highlight of some of them. First of all is West Brom, back in the Prem with Gary Medel as manager. So former Cardiff and Inter Milan player Gary Medel, who was kind of known as being a bit of a nut job, is now a manager. I just don't know, because I could never imagine him managing anything, let alone a football team, because he's just insane. And there's a few other strange ones as well that are going on. If we just flick through just to have a look at them. There's a few normal ones. We then have Hugo Lloris, who's Wolves manager. He's actually done pretty well as a manager. He's had some big clubs under his name, and now he's at Wolves in the Prem. So he's having a good time with it. There's also some other strange ones. You've got Simeone at Arsenal. And then you've got Yaya Toure as Villa boss. Again, bizarre, that one. There's some more normal ones. You've got Nagelsmann at Chelsea and so on. You've got Darren Ferguson who's in the Prem, which I don't think would ever happen, because I don't think he's a particularly good manager in real life. And then Thierry Henry. This is the same database where Henry was at Arsenal earlier on in Season 5. He's now at Liverpool. So yeah, he's having a good time now, is Thierry Henry. I don't know, let's have a quick look and see if he's won much. He's basically just signed for them, it would look like. So no, at Arsenal he didn't win anything, and he's only just joined Liverpool. So it'll be interesting if he does much else while he's here. Other managers though is obviously Pep, who's still at City, who's having a very lovely time in this database. You then got Roger Mercado, who I don't actually know who he is. He's at Man U. And then that kind of wraps up the majority of the strange ones. You've got Scott Parker's in the league. You've got Danny Cowley, who's in the Prem with Rotherham, which is a bit of a strange one, the idea of Rotherham being in the Prem. And then the final one, though, is the fact you have Fabio Cannavaro at Tottenham. It's just like, it's one of the weirdest bunch of managers I think I've ever seen in one division. There's just some like former players and so on who you never imagine would become managers, and managers who just don't think are very good that have got to quite high levels, and it's just very, very strange. It really is. So in this database, we're going to have a quick look at some managers first of all, and then we're going to also look at England, because of course I did say I want to have a look at kind of how England have gotten on with the new TV deal in terms of internationally, see if they've improved. But first of all, let's have a quick look at Cristiano Ronaldo. So this isn't the same one where he was involved at Leicester. He's actually gone into proper management. And if we have a look, you can see Cristiano Ronaldo, he's gone and become Raith Rovers boss in Scotland. And I also have the fact that he's playing a Catenaccio 4-2-3-1 long kind of playing style. I could never imagine Ronaldo being like a Brexit, I guess as they called it, style football type manager are really just results are all that are important, doesn't care how it looks. I just don't think that's kind of how he'd manage his teams. But yeah, so he's managing in lower league Scotland. So, Cristiano Ronaldo, I'm surprised he's on quite as much money as he is, but he's having fun in Scotland as Ronaldo. But that's not the strangest one, to be honest. It really isn't. There's another one, and that's Zlatan Ibrahimovic, a guy I don't think anyone would be expecting to become a football manager. He is in this, and he's having fun going around the lower leagues of England, and he's currently at Boreham Wood in the Vanarama League South. Just the idea of him standing on the touchline, just shouting at players, I just couldn't imagine it, I really couldn't. One of the good things, though, that's come from this database is that England have actually been pretty decent. If we have a look at them and we go and look at how they got on in previous tournaments, let's load up the Euros in here. You can see in 2024, England won the Euros. But not only that, they also went and won the World Cup. So if we go, I think it was 2026, yeah, you can see here, 2026, England won the World Cup as well. So it would seem that England have done quite well from the TV deal. It's also worth noting, though, who their manager was. At the moment, it's now Pablo Machin. But the manager who was there that won the World Cup with them and so on was Sean Dyche. So Sean Dyche is going to be named Sir Sean Dyche, no doubt. And he's now the manager of Milan. And he chose to step down from being England boss to take over at AC Milan. Very, very strange one there. But good to see that England actually is doing well. So guys, that just about wraps up everything I wanted to cover with you in part 1 of the experiment here today. We've already managed to go through the first 10 years of the new TV deal, and we've begun to see a lot of changes already taking place within the English Football League system. Of course, part 2, which will come out in a couple of days' time, we will go through seasons 15 and 20, and I can tell you now, having kind of had a quick look at it, there's a lot of changes that take place in that database already, which are very, very interesting to see. If you have enjoyed today's episode though, guys, please do chuck a like on the episode, and also let me know down in the comment section below what you thought of it as well. Additionally, if you want to see more of the experiment and keep up to date with it, because of course we still have part 2 to come, do subscribe to the channel and you'll be notified when it becomes live on YouTube. Finally guys, as well, if you want to see any more of my content, you can also view the Stones Rolling On Up save, which I have a playlist link down in the comments below, which you can then go and view that save that I'm doing on YouTube as well with Maidstone. Overall guys, thank you very, very much for watching. I will see you again next time.